A Calgary-based nonprofit has released a report looking at how race-based hate is manifesting itself in Canadian communities. The Canadian Cultural Mosaic Foundation collected and analyzed data from incidents that took place from 2018 to 2022. Their goal was to better understand how often they occur. The study found the most common were hate speech and harassment. To explain more about the findings in this study, we're joined by CEO and founder Iman Bukhari. So Iman, why did your organization decide to collect this data?
Definitely. So essentially about 6 years ago, we found that there were so many people consistently contacting our organization, telling us about their race-based hate incidents, so their racist experience, asking, this is what happened to me, what should I do next, and how do I report it? And we would do our best to reply to them, giving them the answers of, how they can be supported and where to report. But the reality was that most of the folks actually told us about incidents, not crimes. So when you report an incident, if you want to the police, nothing essentially happens. So we thought, it's about time that somebody starts really looking at this data and collecting it. And we thought the best way to actually collect this data, for us anyway, because we're not the government, is to look at the media, because we often see people going to the media and telling them about their incident, and the media would report on it. So we collected that over 5 years, really to try and understand the data. Of course, it's so limited. It's only 5 years. It's only what's reported to the media, and the media has decided to report it. So super limited, but it does give us a picture. And what we really want is for the government to have that fuller picture.
And so what did you find out about all of these incidents?
So there's a lot that we found out that's very limited to, certain provinces or certain areas or certain ethnicities that are targeted. But three of the major things that we actually found were that a lot of incidents occurred within government services, whether it's government services that they provide or incidents that occur within politicians kind of denying racism or not giving the service that's needed, as well as in public spaces. We saw that there's everyday racism absolutely so commonplace everywhere, whether it's, places of worships, institutions, educational institutions, workplaces, businesses, online, so much more. And lastly, like an overarching of racist hate that's often violent or verbal attacks or even organized hate.
And so it looks like the incidents, they seem to spike in 2020 but then drop off in 2022. Why do you think that is?
Most likely because, that focus of anti-racism or just focus on racism being a concern has kind of dropped off. People have gotten sick of it, quote unquote. 2020, we saw the murder of George Floyd and several others really spike up that social justice kind of issue amongst people, but also it was early days of COVID-19, so everybody was kind of, within their homes confined, so they had nothing else to do but look at news and whatnot and social media. So they had a more passion, I would say, about this issue, where now it's just back to the way it was before.
Was there anything in the data that you collected that really shocked you or that you weren't expecting to see?
Most of it was fairly we kind of already knew it, but we wanted data there. But definitely, there were reports basically made every single day over the past 5 years. So that's kind of something that's, I think, really important to consider and look at, that this isn't like an anomaly. It isn't like sometimes it happens, but rather it's happening every day. It's happening way beyond what's actually reported. In fact, 96% of the incidents that were actually reported to the media in our study were incidents, so they weren't crimes. So the 4% was actually crime, but 96 were incidents. So if the media is only reporting, one a day kind of thing, imagine how much there actually are, and that's what we really, really need to find out.
And now that you have these findings, they've been collected, they've been released to the public, what do you kind of hope to see happen next?
Well, definitely us as an organization, we're going to be lobbying with different forms of government. What we really want, our call to action, our recommendation, we actually had several recommendations in mind when looking at our data and our study, but we just strategically decided on one recommendation because we think it's the most important, is to push our federal government to work in partnerships with the municipal and provincial governments to collect race-based hate incidents in order to have a fuller picture of what racism looks like. Everyday folks that are racialized and Indigenous are continuously saying that, hey, racism is a concern, yet we're only looking at police-reported data when we know that a lot of these communities have mistrust within the police systems, and also there are so many limitations within, what a police even considers a crime and what not. So there's just not enough transparency. So we want to lobby our government to make this change. So definitely we'll be having a petition shortly set up and working with MPs and senators to try and push this forward.
What would make it easier for people who are racialized to be able to report things that are happening to them?
Definitely the process right now is terrible. Of course, the police is really only interested in crimes for one thing, but even if you have a crime, it takes a long time to go to the police. They ask a lot of questions. They have a big form, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing. I think it's important to get data, but their system can be improved. Also, I think their attitude can be improved as well. That's a consistent issue that we've found within racialized and particularly Indigenous communities that they brought up, that I don't like going to the police. And even the police don't want to collect incidents because they're more interested in crime, right? So let's step away from the police in terms of gathering this data. We need an independent agency that's not related to the government in any way, shape, or form to collect this data. And really study, the trends, because they're going to consistently change over time, and that's why it needs to have adequate ongoing funding. So we really recommend it not being part of the national anti-racism strategy that they recently put out, because that can change according to the governments that are in place. This needs to be an ongoing thing because this is going to change. In order for us to really mitigate racism, Canada